What's going on, everybody? My name is Hassiem Muhammad, and you are listening to The Actor's Instrument. Look, while we love to be on stage or in front of a camera, we have to admit that for most of us, the bulk of our job as actors is auditioning. And with that being said, who better to have on the show than one of the biggest names in casting, Tiffany Little Canfield of the Telsey office? Now, whether you know her or not, you have for sure seen her work. Listen to this list of films: The Greatest Showman, In the Heights, Mean Girls, The Little Mermaid, The Color Purple, Focus, which I had to throw that in there. It's one of my personal favorites. And all of these are just within the last few years. And she's got television, right? Let's talk about TV's hottest new show, Tracker. How about Only Murders in the Building and the upcoming Wicked movie? We're also talking 41 Emmy nominations and 5 wins for casting. It's clear that Tiffany knows a thing or two about putting together some rockstar casts, and I'm so excited to have her on the show, not just because she works on these flashy projects, but because she's a straight shooter and will tell you how it is. Tiffany, thank you for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I do have to say, I do not have 41 Emmy nominations.
That's what Tiffany, that's what the internet says.
Okay, well, the
That's
internet, and I am glad to be the one to break this news. It's a liar. I really had the honor to be nominated a couple of times, but not quite that many
the
times.
internet is always right, folks.
Oh gosh,
Everything
oh
you read.
gosh.
Um,
We're gonna have to fight now.
thank you for the clarification. Listen, I have 0 Emmy nominations, so I think you're doing great.
Thank you.
How so we have the same alma mater, the North Carolina School of the Arts, and I believe you were there as a directing student,
Mhm.
and at that time, certainly it was directing for theater. So, how do you go from directing for theater to casting some of the biggest films in Hollywood?
Well, unlike actors, we who are graduating from the directing program don't necessarily have a showcase, right? We don't have meetings set up at all. We don't leave school with a portfolio necessarily. I guess you could put one together, but it would be, of course, of schoolwork, and we all know that that is only going to get you so far in our field.
Yeah.
So I moved to New York, and I really didn't know exactly how to get started. I knew that I knew no one. I had no connections, and I needed money to live because my family's super supportive of me, but not necessarily in a financial position to support me in New York City. So I just got a job. I, moved in with some friends and then found an apartment I could afford. I basically sort of spent the first 3 months just feathering the nest, making sure I could live here because I was very intimidated. I'm from California, and moving to New York was very intimidating to me, especially
Mm,
without a clear path towards work. I knew needed to meet people, so I once I felt comfortable, I could live here and I knew I liked it. I started to look for an internship, something you could do back in 2001. And actually, I could do until very recently, but I looked for a place where I could get in the door, meet people, figure out what it is they do, how did New York work, and I was established enough by this point at my restaurant, I could talk to my manager about doing doubles on the weekends so that I could be available to
mm.
do, because most internships were kind of like full-time jobs, except you didn't make money, right? Um, and so I answered a couple ads and I got close to some big dream ones, but I did get one, which was in casting, which I didn't know at that time was a career. I'd heard of
Mm.
it, of course, as someone who went to acting school and directing school, but I didn't know that a lot of times in the West Coast, it's like the associate artistic director runs the auditions for the theater.
Oh, sure.
You didn't necessarily know of the title of a casting director. I never had paid attention to that. Um, and it was in casting. It was working on Baz Luhrmann's production of Puccini's La Boheme on Broadway, and it was an opera. So I started working in casting. That was actually at the Telsey office, which was known as Bernie Telsey Casting at that time.
Mhm.
Though I didn't work directly with Bernie, I worked with a woman named Heidi Marshall, who was the casting director on Boheme, and I was her assistant or intern at first, and then I became her assistant, And though we didn't really pay attention to titles as much back then, I was really sort of working as her casting associate on that show. And then she got hired by Baz Luhrmann to be his associate director, and I took over casting and became the casting director of that play, which
Mm,
was right place, right time. I did work my ass off, and I think that frankly, school had prepared me for a job like that, and my strengths were really noticed. Working with opera singers and getting them to a position where they could succeed in a Baz Luhrmann acting audition was sort of what I did. Really was working
okay.
with opera singers, starting, how it is in music, starting with that speech in English as a monologue, then moving to Italian, bringing in the music, just sort of breaking down the beats of the scene, other than musically, but from an acting standpoint, which a lot of opera singers had not experienced that process. And so they invited me to stay. Once Bohem was up and running, I maintained it for the next couple of years. And then I also would do work on a play, work on a musical, work on a commercial. I was lucky to work in an office that did all sorts of projects.
Yeah.
And when I started doing commercials, it was clear that I was really, really comfortable directing actors, because commercials are, you want everyone to be bookable. It's a volume game as opposed to any other casting where you're looking for the perfect person for each part, only one person. You really want a lot of people called back.
Right.
So it became really clear that I was very comfortable directing actors, me in the room, come in and direct the commercial auditions. And
Mm,
so I did that for a couple of years, and then, we did a film, and Bernie and I did the film because I kind of knew the tech and knew the camera equipment, and also had been working kind of on camera,
mhm.
and he we had a great time working on that film, and so then we decided, "Let's try to, like, do more films." Like, what happens if we reach out to people and let them know we also cast film or
Mm,
television? Because we weren't as known for that in those days,
yeah.
and the rest is history.
That's a super cool story. As much as you said that, like you had never really thought of casting as a career, it seems like you were just perfectly equipped for it. Like and when I say that, not necessarily that on the surface perfectly equipped, but you were able to leverage the skills you had to, you
Yes,
know.
I felt really clear. It was really clear to me what the job was, and I think it I think I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing, and I think that I
Mhm.
was able to kind of um see what needed to be done, really. And I also was someone who, at drama school, you have the person who's kind of like the book smart person who gets, like, frustrated with all the touchy-feely sometimes, and I'm like, "Can we get to the text, please? I wanna be challenged on the text." I was that person in college,
Mm,
so I really enjoy the more challenging aspects of casting that get that are creative, but, like, get away from that part too, where you have to do both things, really think right and left brain.
sure, sure, sure. So
That's why I ultimately decided to stay in casting. At first, I thought, "Okay, I'll do this. I'll do like what Heidi did. I'll do this until I connect with a director, and then I'll say, I'd leave and become an associate director." But I really, when that opportunity came, I really didn't want to. I
mm,
really realized I love doing this.
wow. This was also my first time hearing of kind of the genesis of the Telsey office's move into film and TV. Um, what would you say is the biggest difference in casting from theater to working on camera?
I think, well, the biggest difference is usually in TV and film, the casting director is a big part of negotiating the business side.
Sure.
Where in the theater, often there's a general manager, and once we identify who we want to make an offer to, we just create sort of like an what we call an offer sheet, which is, "Hey guys, here's who we want to offer. Here's their information. Have at it." And then the general manager makes the offer and negotiates. TV and film, we really do, and um, that's the biggest difference, I would say, is
Okay.
negotiating for, on a job was not necessarily a part of what we did at all in the theater.
Okay. Okay. Um, and do you have any like go to like just audition do's and don'ts. I want to say I want to preface this by saying I took a class of yours. It's just a year ago. Wow, this
Mhm.
was a long year. Anyways, it was just a year ago, and I pulled out my notebook and I went through my notes from that class. And what I appreciated about your class was I think it was the first time I've taken class with a casting director who had such an emphasis on just doing the work. Like, we showed
That's
up
the gig.
we showed up and you were like, "All right, boom, here, do this, da, da, da." No, and like, I was like, "Oh, we're being directed." And so you have an emphasis on the craft, you know? And so that's kind of what I'm getting at here. When folks come into the room, what are
That's
the
the biggest
yeah.
challenge. I think there's a lot of people who they questions always astound me, which are sort of like, "What makes a good self-tape?" It reminds me back in the day when I would teach and people would say, "What makes a good resume?" And I'm like, "Think we gotta think smarter. What do you think I'm looking for?" And that is the challenge because a lot of actors try to think, "What are we looking for in terms of, um, what is this character supposed to be? What are we looking for in this character?" As opposed to knowing what we're looking for are good actors,
Mm,
good acting, people with craft, people who know how to break down a script, people who make things personal, who bring themselves and their artistry to the role. I'm looking for a collaborator in an audition. I am looking for an artist, a fully formed artist. And I think I was just talking to a manager about this. I think a lot of actors think the audition room is a space for learning.
mm,
They are really dependent on feedback. And I'm
mm,
like, no, no, you're not asking for something in the audition room. You're giving something. You're coming in with an idea. You have taken that text and you have brought your taste, your choices. That's why I always say I prefer a strong wrong to nothing. Because so many actors come in and they read it flat and they memorize it, but they really want me to tell them what to do.
sure.
And that's just not who I'm looking for.
That's such great feedback because I feel like, at least I have heard, come up with a strong choice. I've also heard in the past, like, the audition, it's not a finished product. And,
Well, yeah, it's
you
not a
know,
finished product, but I wanna have to step on that
please
because
do.
it's not a finished product doesn't mean like, when you go into week 1 of rehearsal and you're prepared, right? Like, you've spent some time hopefully, I actually like when people come into the read through and they've had the part, obviously, that they've done some work and they have some plans. That doesn't mean you're locked in. That doesn't mean you're heading into tech and you've got a frozen show.
Yeah.
But you've done the work, and you know if you've been in a play, right, there's some people who show up and they haven't done anything,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
They've read it, they don't have any choices going on, and so that's where I'm saying, "You guys, it's a process, it's not black and white, it's not either you don't make any choices or you're locked into a final performance."
Yeah. No, that, I mean,
That's why I
that
have to
makes,
call it out because 'cause I'm like, we're getting too much like it's either or, the magic's in the middle.
mm. No, this is exactly what I want to hear. I love that you're stepping on it. Please. Because yeah, there people, we do think about things too black and white. It's just this polarized thing where we're like, oh, it's this or it's that. Um, and I think we can get too bogged down in, like you said, oh, what are they looking for versus, listen, this is what I got, and we can go from there. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, no, I appreciate that. You mentioned in this class that I took that you feel theater translates to film and TV.
Mhm.
I wanted to know if you could elaborate on that.
If you look at the greatest actors of recent generations and even currently working today, where did they come from? Actors, right? Like the greatest actors. If you look at the resumes of the people who were not every single one, but a lot of people who are nominated for Oscars or win Emmys,
Mhm,
where do they come from? The theater, but we focus on their film and television career. So this idea, so like who are the people when I think of actors that I love, I do think of Kate Winslet or, and I don't know that Kate Winslet started in the theater. I believe she did actually as a young person, but then got into film and television quite
Mhm.
quickly, because I think her family, were actors. Um, but there's people like Kate Blanchett too, who came from the theater, and it's, Philip Seymour Hoffman, to me, one of the greatest actors of the 21st century is and people think like, "Oh, it translated." I'm like, "This guy has always been a theater guy. He was always a theater person." So for me, it's sort of like, why is it a mystery that theater is people are good at film and television? Like, I feel like that's us not realizing how many people
Yeah.
are in the theater. I remember one person saying to me, a young person at school, saying Dane DeHaan, got out of school in Book Chronicle. And I was like, he won an Obie Award. He won an off-Broadway, very highly coveted theater award for a play at the Rattlestick Theater before any of that happened.
Yeah.
But we focus on I think that that's what we have to be really careful as artists, is really doing the research and seeing the truth as opposed to only focusing on the end result.
Yeah, and focusing on, like, the glitz and the glam, I feel like a couple of years ago, This Is Us, right? And people were
Mhm.
like, "Where did Sterling K. Brown come from?" And
Case in
it's
point.
right, and everybody in New York was like, "What? What do you mean where'd he come from? This guy, he's not an overnight." But people perceive some of these stars in that way. They're like, "Oh, it's overnight. Oh, they got lucky," versus what you said, like, no, they have craft. They are artists. You are just getting to know them.
Mhm.
Um,
Exactly.
so I've noticed, and maybe it's not a new thing, but maybe it's just where I'm at in my career. I've noticed a lot lately that we're in a world of a lot of straight to offers. The landscape, there's a lot of straight to offers. And like I said, it may not be any different. It may just be where I'm currently at in my career.
Mhm.
So the question is, how do we compete with that?
Well, you can't compete with a straight to offer because who are they you have to focus on who is the offer,
Mhm.
right? And what is their resume? Because that's why they're getting an offer, is because of their resume. Trust me, the creative teams would love these people. They would love everyone to read. But there are people who you cannot get and their work is known. And so they are and I do think this is a case of where you're looking at a situation at the eh, like what parts okay, going back.
Mhm.
Straight to offer is always it is and has always been there. It absolutely is and has always been there. What's happening now is there are less jobs. That's what's happening, not that more are straight to offer, but there
Sure.
are less jobs in general. And there are only so many offer people because they are, they're known, they are, usually have some kind of fame, they have some kind of what we call marquee value, meaning that they have fans, and if we cast them, there's a likelihood that more people will watch it. Um, and let's just be honest, when you think of shows that you enjoy and watch, how often are you watching shows with people that you have never seen before in them?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's just common. That's not a new concept. That was probably the same in the Renaissance during, like, Shakespeare's time. It was definitely in the beginning of America when it would be like, "Oh my gosh, this British actor is coming over, and he's doing Richard III, and the most famous actor in America is also doing Richard III," and they're having, like, a war down, in old-timey New York.
Mhm.
That is all about fame. That's the same. That didn't happen because, "Oh my god, there was just a really good production with that nobody had heard of anybody in it." It was because it was like, "Is their star better than our star?"
Sure.
Um, so I really don't think there's any way to compete with straight to offer. If there's somebody who has a great resume and is a well-known good actor and you are not as well known, how do you can't compete with their resume. What you can do is go for the parts where it doesn't happen because it's also happening every day where people do not, people read and get a part.
Sure. And
That's also happening every day.
and to be clear, I'm not salty at all. Trust, I would love for people to be calling me with offers. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
I I hold it
Yeah.
against no actor, like, get your offer, like, because as you said, And I love that you said it's going to the people who have put in the work, who have established themselves. It's not undeserved, and
Well,
I
it might be. It depends. There's everything. Yes, and.
sure.
There's times where it's like, they are really worried no one's gonna see the show, so they cast somebody who they think people are gonna care about seeing. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, every artist, and that counts as producers, directors, actors, everyone wants people to see their work. And we're lucky where our work is commercialized, so you also have corporations interested in shows being seen, movies being seen. So that is everyone wants that. And trust
Yeah.
me, I always say this to young actors. If you write an independent film and you get lucky enough to sell it, and you go into your first meeting with your producer, in the studio, and they say, "Hey, I'm so excited and I loved all the readings we've done with your college roommate. But, you know, um, Tom Holland is perfect for this part, is exactly looking for this part." Do you know what you're going to do? I know you wanna say you're gonna I wrote that part for my college roommate, he's gotta play it. You are gonna want Tom Holland
Yeah.
or Timothy Do you know what I mean? Like, you're
Yeah.
gonna want a young, wonderful actor like, Giovanna Depo or something, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
someone who you've seen in something because you want people to watch it
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
No, absolutely. Like I said, I totally understand, and even when I was during the pandemic working on my web series, I was like, we had auditions for one role. Now this was a much smaller scale, but same principle. I called the people who I knew I could trust, who I knew would do well in the role. Like there's so much that goes
Yeah,
into it. Um, and so I think it's helpful. I asked, how do we compete? And you're like, don't. And I think the
yeah,
reason why I really think that that's important is because it's easy to get like bogged down and feel like, oh, like you ask your reps, like, oh, could you submit me for this? And they're like, oh, well, so and so, there's an offer out for the role. And you can get down in the dumps or like feel like shit. Instead, you could be like, all right, cool. So what can I focus on?
correct.
Because
That's the key to it. You've gotta build your resume to be competitive, and so if you have okay, let's say you have booked like, what TV have you booked? What plays have you booked? If you haven't booked anything in New York, right, at all, and you're, like, trying to go for the leads, why aren't you trying to get leads in the regionals that all audition in New York? Like, book something or get an ensemble part with an understudy. Like, get something. If you're like, the same actor believes in themselves who's going for that. Like, I think there's this whole like people are applying like a corporate ladder idea or something to acting where it's like, I'm a lead, so I'm going to have nothing on my resume till I get a lead. It's like, that's not how it works.
right.
Right. In fact, I was just reading today about uh, Denzel Washington, who went to ACT, graduated from ACT in the theater, of course,
Hmm.
and then was doing summer stock
Yeah.
and doing off Broadway plays. Right. That is people start somewhere. If you're focusing on the goal and saying, that's what I want, and I'm not going to take anything less, you don't understand the process.
Mm. No,
Right.
absolutely. Absolutely.
What's going on, everybody? Hassiem here. I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. And if you haven't heard already, The Actor's Instrument is now a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment. We're excited to continue to bring you the best industry insights and introduce you to new artists who are making it work. And with this partnership with Red Letter, we're excited to bring you even more content, live episodes, and Q&As. New episodes of The Actor's Instrument will drop every Tuesday. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to check us out at theactorsinstrument.com and follow Actors Instrument Podcasts on all social media platforms so you never miss a beat.
You also mentioned in the past that you get really annoyed by bad pitches. So,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you probably get them every day, and I'm so sorry that you have to comb through those. Or,
I wouldn't even refer to them as pitches. I'd say they're emails where they're like, this is a person with a pulse and a dream, which is nice, but like, that's not a pitch. A pitch is like, they just won Rising Star at Sundance. The movie hasn't come out yet, so you haven't heard of them. I don't know, like, or they have
yeah. Well,
something
well.
that's
So
sounds competitive.
if I was an actor and I saw you were, maybe Deadline releases an article that this movie's coming out in 2025, and I see that the Telsey office is attached. And so I say, okay, I want to get ahead of this. What would what would a solid pitch look like if somebody's trying to just get their foot in the door and be seen?
I wanna know more, what part do you like, let's get specifics, just, like, make because it's so different. It's constantly like, there's all different kinds of parts, there's different kinds of movies, like, let's say a specific, like, maybe something you've
Okay,
seen or yeah,
great. Let's do this because I thought it was wonderful. The Color Purple, and also
okay,
because that's a show we can research because it was a play in a book, right?
yeah.
So let's say a year before or a year, 2 years before, I see an article. Playbill's like, oh, they're gonna turn this Tony Award winning show into a film. Telsey Office is casting. It's The Color Purple, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I would love to do The Color Purple. I did it when I was in high school, and now I'm actually age appropriate. Um, I want to get seen.
For which part?
Okay, so that's the first point, right? So
Yep.
for folks who are listening, like narrow in on which part. I'm probably too young for, I guess. Okay, let's say I'm blanking on the character's name, but Corey Hawkins' role, the young guy,
Harpo.
Harpo. Thank you. Um, and it's funny, I actually do have a friend who, anyways. So okay, so Harpo, I want to go in for Harpo. Um, yeah.
Have you done a film before?
Have I done? I have once.
A
I've done.
studio feature film?
No, I've not done a studio feature before.
Right. So, okay, have you done a musical on Broadway?
No. Also, this question isn't actually about me, but because
I know, I'm
I
just
don't
saying,
do
but this
musicals.
is the
But
I'm just using a specifics here
oh,
to
sure,
to
sure,
say
okay,
how you I'm not saying for you to shame you or anything, I'm saying if that's your dream and that's the part you wanna play. Right now, I would say it's not competitive
sure,
to be a lead in a movie who because you're competing against everyone who's similar to you in the age range, who could be right for Harpo, who has been done those things, who has been in a movie, who has done that. So that's what you have to look at, not the part. Think of now that doesn't mean you shouldn't go for it, but you want to be aware of what are you going to pitch because that's your competition,
right.
right? You need to know so what would your pitch be? I wanna play Harpo, it's my dream?
Yeah, no, that's terrible.
Right. That's it's not a pitch. I'm not in the sense of
Yeah,
that's basically the same if you're a screenwriter going and saying, "I've written something, it's really good." Nobody comes in and says, "I've written something, it's shit."
right,
Right? No
right.
one says that. You have to have a pitch where you've got a specifics. I've written something, I think it's relevant because of this, this, this. I think it's an adaptation of a book that's hugely popular. It's you know what I mean? It's sort of like this idea with this, I've got this actor attached. Like
Mhm.
you need to have something that I have context for other than I'm talented and I would like to play this part. That is not enough for us to go on because that's what everybody says.
Okay, so what about this? This is great. I love this. So, I remember you were casting a project where you needed longboarders,
Yes,
right?
it was Mean Girls, the musical.
Mean
Mhm.
Girls. Okay, I do longboard, so I have a little bit better context for this. So would it have been appropriate for me to reach out and say, "Hey, Tiffany, I hear that your office is seeking longboarders." If I'm being honest with you, I'm not sure of the specifics of the character, but it sounds like my skill set's appropriate. Here's a video of me dancing on my longboard.
That is brilliant. Exactly. Desperate for that, and then that's something I can actually share with my team. Number 1, it's so specific. And longboard dancers were, that thing that we are trying to get. Whether or not you might be the right age range, I'm not sure to play a high school for them or whatever. But like, because we did actually have a pretty, usually you have older people playing high school. We actually had kind of like 18 to 22
Oh,
real
sick.
life playing. So that could have been blocked it, but I would have sent it. Like honestly, we really have a if I make sure I see it, and make sure and then if I don't see it, who am I working with? Because sometimes what ends up happening too is we're working as a team, especially at Telsey. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that's why I think a lot of people not that I'm encouraging everyone to reach out to my associates all the time, but like the associates are also managing some stuff where they are more sometimes in the trenches of logistics and also emails, and I'm on the phone begging famous people to come do it so people will watch it, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah, yeah.
sort of so you wanna reach out to a team too, not just one casting director, right? Like, that's important.
Yeah. No, I this is a conversation I always love having because in my experience, I've seen a lot of actors, you sign with an agent and then just kind of sit back and on your laurels. And it's like, yo, listen, I mean, my last 2 jobs, I sent my agents the information.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, this is blah, blah. I'm perfect for this. Here's why. I have a friend who recently lost his reps and he wanted to they're casting a show at the Goodman. Um, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna send in like I'm gonna." What was he saying? I think he was just talking about the play, and I was like, "Oh, you should pitch yourself." And he was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I have the casting director's email," so I sent it to him. He sent me his pitch, and it was kind of as you described. He was basically just saying like, "Hey, I think this sounds like a fun show," you know. And so, long story short, I did my best to help him with his pitch, and he got called in without a rep, without being a Chicago local. I told him, I was like, "Bro," I was like, "Do you have a friend in Chicago whose couch you can sleep on? If you can tell them you can be a local hire, that's huge." Like, there's many things that go into getting in the room and getting cast that I think that sometimes as actors we tend to neglect.
Well, it's not the fun part. That's the hard thing is that, we're sensitive. We also have there's a huge amount of fear about actually putting your heart and soul into it because then if you don't get it, it feels more painful to be rejected, obviously. So there's like this you're trying to walk a line of protecting yourself, but also putting yourself out there. And I think that that's where um, people really struggle. I had a friend who once said to me, I only book the jobs I don't really want. And she was connecting it to preparation.
Mm,
So I've started to like not prepare as much when I want a job. And part of me thought, "Well, you're thinking of it the wrong way. The preparation's not the problem. Why do you think you don't want the job that you book?
mm.
Because it doesn't pay as much, because it's out of town, it's not a good part, all these things. Don't you think that means that job's probably less competitive than the jobs you want,
Ooh,
right?
ooh, I didn't think about it that way, but that's a good point.
That's the truth right there.
Yeah,
It's not as competitive. So you're not competing against people who have more credits. You're sort of it's the big fish in the little pond, little fish in a big pond. You need to know where you are and which fish you are because you can grow to the big fish, right? That's how it happens. Everyone starts as the little fish. Everyone starts at the little fish. Even people whose parents are connected, they're still a little fish until they show us they've got the talent, right?
absolutely.
And, so you just need to be aware of that it's competitive. Lots of people want these jobs. And so you gotta look inside. What do you bring to it? And it's the craft. What you bring is your artistry and your craft. That's why
Mm,
your preparation is the only thing you have.
yeah,
Can never be a block or you're not doing it right.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I have one final question.
Mhm.
The show is the actor's instrument. And we all want to be repeat offenders. We want to be the person that routinely gets called in. So what is a defining quality? What is it about the actors that you love to bring in over and over again? You mentioned craft. What is it about their craft? What is it that they bring in that separates them from the field?
There's not It's so subjective, it's not possible to really answer that question. I would say good acting, but that could mean something specific to me. Let me see. Someone who looks for subtext specifically, who figures out the tone, who understands how to find an intention, a tactic, right? Like, I mean, acting, they're reliable, that they're smart when it comes to scripts, and they're going to have done the work. That really is a repeat offender, is someone that never does nothing, that never just sort of learns it and is earnest and never looks underneath the surface, you know, someone who does their research, because research really helps you find the tone,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that's great to hear. And I actually love, I think you're the first person who mentioned specifically subtext and tone. I'm gonna hang on to that. I love everybody I have on says something different, which is I'm still impressed that that is the case. um, but
Well, we
awesome.
all come from different, especially industry people, we all come at it from a different place. Mine is definitely from a text-based place, and that's my training, and I believe in it, and I see it work, and that's how I would define what the actors we're hiring are doing, is they're bringing, like, scene work.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, Tiffany, thank you for keeping it real. You know, beyond your work and beyond the like big Hollywood studio films, I love how dedicated you are to the craft. Earlier I caught you said we as artists, and I just love that like you are an artist, you've always been an artist, and I love that you still consider yourself one. Um, and I love that you are dedicated to helping actors reach their full potential and keep it real. Like I said, and stay realistic and not sugarcoat. Like, listen, this is what it is. Um, how can slash should folks keep up with you? I know you're on social media. Um, I don't know if you want
Well,
to say your
because
handle out loud,
yeah,
but
I used to say postcards, but unfortunately, we're more nomadic than we were pre-pandemic, as many of us are. So really for me, the Instagram, like messaging me, I don't really use that in my normal life, except for casting, like how I reached out to people who were longboard artists was on Instagram. But it goes both ways. And so I look and see, and even though I do have a private accounts, don't worry about, I still can see the messages, where you click and it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
other messages. I look in there because I obviously tell actors that's the way to keep in touch with me. And if you have clips you want to show me or something or anything you want to tell me about, I just say, message me on Instagram because again, it's not something I use in my life
great. What's your
except for work.
handle? What's your handle?
Oh God, I think it's NYCTLC. Let me
Let me
see.
see if I can. I'm not gonna
Instagram.
find it.
TLC NYC.
There we go, folks. TLC NYC. If you're not already, folks, if you're not already tuning into Tracker, they're saying it's the hottest show, and I fully support that statement. It's incredible. It's like one of my favorite shows right now. Be sure to check out the trailer for Wicked. It's coming to us this November. Another thank you to Tiffany for coming on the show, and thank you for listening. Before you go, please like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. I'll catch you on the next episode of The Actor's Instrument. Till next time, y'all. Peace.
Thank you for listening to The Actor's Instrument. I'm Hassiem Muhammad, and you can follow me at Hassiem Muhammad and the show at Actors Instrument Podcast on all social media platforms. The Actors Instrument is a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment. Executive producers, Adam Jellicourse, Serena Esposito, and yours truly. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and check us out at theactorsinstrument.com. We'll be back next Tuesday. Till next time, y'all. Peace.